Thank you and good evening. Unaccustomed as I am to speaking in public, I've been asked to say a few words on this most really remarkable occasion. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with weddings in the UK, speeches are a traditional component of the wedding proceedings, and so I'm not just doing this because I enjoy hearing myself speak, although there is that. My first duty is to welcome you here to historic Edinburgh Castle, in this, the capital city of my adopted nation. When I say historic, you've heard of Mary, Queen of Scots? This was her summer place. And her son, King James, yes, that King James, the one who commissioned the 1611 translation, English translation of the Bible, he was born in the next room. And there's actually an amazing family connection to this place as well. On both sides of this new family that has been created today. For in 1860, George Lindsay, who was the great-great-great-grandfather of Lindsay Hadden Wise, which sounds very strange to say, was stationed right here in Edinburgh Castle. Some years before that, Thomas McCaskey, the great-great-great-great-grandfather of James McCaskey Wise, my son-in-law, boy does that sound strange to say, founded a hat manufacturing company and had a retail hat shop literally yards from where we sit this evening on the other side of Castle Rock with a clear and imposing view of Edinburgh Castle. Thomas McCaskey's wife, Elizabeth Taylor McCaskey, continued to operate the shop after her husband's death during the time that George Lindsay was stationed here. And so it is entirely conceivable that the great-great-great-grandfather of the bride bought hats from the great-great-great-great-grandmother of the groom. But enough of the buying habits of Victorian Scotland. Back to welcoming you. There are many in this room who have come a great long way to be here tonight, most of whom came here with a great deal of difficulty in terms of their travel. And we appreciate that more than any of you can know. And no one has come farther than James's brother, Chris, the best man, who lives on the Pacific island of Guam. And no one appreciates the convenience of our selection of Edinburgh Castle than Ross and Linda Saunderson, who live about 4 miles up the road. But to all of you who have come from near and far, you honor both families by your presence with us tonight. And I'm sure you would have done the very same thing had the wedding been in, for instance, Cleveland or something like that. But you've come here to Edinburgh, and that's what's important. Christine and I are especially happy to have our siblings and some of their families with us tonight. My sister Nancy and her husband Brian have come from Tennessee, and my brother Mike from Jacksonville. Now, this is Nancy and Brian's first trip to Scotland, and actually Brian was a little concerned that here in Scotland he might stand out a little from the crowd and be a little conspicuous because, I'll just go ahead and say it. He's a string bass player, not a bagpiper. And yet you've been made to feel very welcome here, have you not? Very good, yes. And now Mike has actually been to Scotland before. We brought him here 25 years ago along with our parents who came. Now Mike wore his hair a little differently then, which is to say he wore hair. But it's just such an honor to have all of you who would come from the United States on this special day. Our friends, our family, everyone who's come from so far away. We're especially happy also to have Christine's brother, David, and his entire family here with us mostly from the south of England, not entirely. And the reason I say especially happy is because this has given us the chance to meet Grace and Anya, the two newest members of the family. We've seen the rest of them quite a bit in the last few years, actually, so we weren't as excited about that. But we're delighted to have been able to see these two beauties. David and Anne, Fiona and Sofian, whose wedding we attended last summer, and now baby Anya. Emma and Tim, whose wedding Christine and Lindsay attended 2 years before that, and their baby Grace. All came up from the south of England. And the smartest one in the whole family is Andrew, the uncle of these two beautiful babies, who still lives here in Scotland and who actually works here in Edinburgh, although I understand he's not going to be working tomorrow, and perhaps there's a reason for that. But we're glad all of the Prentices, the Alcasums, and the Sims are here tonight. And to all of our friends and our other family members from the U.S. and other parts of England and Scotland, and especially everyone whom I have just offended by not mentioning individually. You've gone to great effort, many of you to great expense, to be here. That's very humbling, and we appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Christine and I have made a number of new friends through Lindsay and James, but none more significant to us than Joanne and Jack. Joanne and Jack, we so appreciate your friendship. And because they only live about 10 minutes from us, if there are grandchildren, I'm just saying if, no pressure kids, they should be fairly easy to share, won't they? Which makes them sound a little bit like nachos at a Super Bowl party, and that's not what I mean, but I think you know and you get the picture. There's one person among us tonight without whom none of us would be here tonight. I can say that with certainty. And without whom two of you, Lindsay and Alec, pretty much wouldn't be anywhere. Wrap your head around that. And that is Anne Marie Bush. Anne? Anne Marie set Christine and me up on a date more than 29 years ago. 4 months later, at another historic castle about 180 miles north of here, Edinburgh Castle, I asked Christine to marry me, and for reasons I have yet to be able to fathom, she said yes. We got married 6 months later, started our family, and the rest, as they say, has been very expensive. Now, by 1987 North Florida standards, Christine and I were a little older than the average when we got married, which is to say we had finished school. And so people immediately began asking Christine, so do you plan to have a family? And she would say yes, all in good time. And people would say, well, you better get your skates on, honey. At your age, they would say, at your age, it could take a while. It took about 10 minutes. James, I'm just saying, she is her mother's daughter. Leave nothing to chance. The very first thing I saw of Lindsay coming into the world was a lock of curly red hair. Little did I know that that curly red hair would be such an issue in the years to come. I mean, look at Lindsay's hair today. Now that it has become chemically dependent, you would never know that it was ever a problem. But I'll never forget the first time that we took Lindsay to get her first haircut. We went to a professional hairdresser, someone with industrial strength equipment. And he sat Lindsay in the chair, and the first thing he said, he looked at Christine and said, Mom, how would you like her hair cut? And Christine said, oh, keep it pretty full, just a wee trim here and there. Looked at me and said, Dad, how would you like it cut? And I said, get it pretty short, if you would. And he looked at 3-year-old Lindsay and said, and dear, how would you like to have it cut? And she looked up at him and she said, straight. I love Lindsay's account of how she and James first came to know, or how she first came to know of James, as written on their wedding website. She says, and I quote, "James and Lindsay technically met in 1993 at St. Andrew's Episcopal Day School in Jacksonville, Florida. Lindsay had a huge crush on James, who was in the second grade at the time. Lindsay was only 4 and looked like Orphan Annie, so naturally the relationship did not take off. It was only when they were both in their 20s that they met again, quite by accident, if you believe in accidents. And here we are tonight. Well, James, it's just as well that there was that little interlude, because that means you missed the entire mullet stage. Or again, perhaps none of us would be here tonight. Another thing that's a little hard to believe, looking at Lindsay today, is that her fashion sense when she was growing up could only accurately be described as bohemian. We never really knew what Lindsay was going to go out of the house wearing. And I can remember more than 100 occasions on which she would try to go out of the house and she would be sent back up the stairs by her mother. She would run up the stairs in a state of high indignation to change into something more suitable, if far less interesting. I'd been told that as the father of a teenage daughter, a very attractive, if perhaps a bit bohemian teenage daughter, that I could expect a steady succession of young men to show up at our door during Lindsay's teen years. And that didn't really happen so much. There was the odd one or two, and yes, one of them was particularly odd, if I remember, but not all that many. And so when more than 5 years ago, Lindsay started talking about this guy, James, I thought she might be onto something. And then I met him, and I thought, well, there goes that. I distinctly remember the first time we met James. We all, as a family, went out to dinner at that emporium of Caribbean authenticity, Bahama Breeze, in the St. John's Town Center in Jacksonville. Now, keep in mind, Lindsay had always expressed an interest or a preference for tall, wiry, red-headed, fair-skinned, Scottish, or at the very least, Irish-looking guys, which, of course, describes James to a T. And you know, they, whoever they are, say that women often choose someone who's a lot like their father. Oh yeah, James and I are practically indistinguishable from each other in every way. No. Just so it shows how much they know. So when we first sat down to dinner that night, I took one look at James and I thought, this will be a one and done kind of a thing. And then as dinner progressed, I thought, but I kind of like this guy for Lindsay, so I hope I'm wrong. Then as I saw how James looked at Lindsay and how she looked at him, how they regarded each other, I thought, you know what? There might be something here. And in these 5 years, I've come to know James as one of the hardest working men I've ever known. And so ever since my own father and Christine's father, Jim, in fact, I see a lot of both of those men in you, James. So maybe this thing about a woman going for someone like their father skips a generation every now and then. James, over the course of the last 5 years, I've slowly relinquished my time with Lindsay to you. And now that you're married, I complete that process. But the daddy-daughter days that we've spent, like the one in New York City for Lindsay's 8th birthday, the one in Glasgow about 2 years ago, and just some days we've had here in Edinburgh in the last week. I'm keeping those, buddy. So every now and then, I know you'll understand if I need a Lindsay fix, right?
Of course.
Thank you. Lindsay and James, you have decided to do life together. Not just to live together in the holy estate of matrimony, but to do life together. And having done life with your mother, Lindsay, for more than 28 years now, I feel that I'm somewhat qualified to give you and James a bit of advice on how to do life well together. So remember first that love is a verb. It's an action word. It's more than a feeling. It's something you choose to do, even on those occasions when your spouse is not particularly lovable. Just ask Christine. And as youth gives way to middle age, and as waistlines and hairlines just give way, remember that you married a soul, and that never changes. Practice laughter. If you do have children, there will be even more opportunities to do this. Find things that you can both laugh at, and just delight hilariously in each other's love. Don't worry about whose job it is, whose fault it is, or who gets the credit. Just clean it up. Be quick to forgive. Just ignore each other's shortcomings. Help each other overcome each other's shortcomings, but don't help too much. And James, breakfast in bed regularly will make it a lot easier for your wife to ignore your shortcomings. I speak from experience. And finally, don't sweat the small stuff. And remember that it's mostly all small stuff. Lindsay and James, you have chosen to do life together. Do life well. Do life for each other. Do life in love. And now a traditional Scottish toast for the future life of James and Lindsay Wise. So if you would all raise your glasses, and with my apologies to my Scottish family and friends, this can only be done with a Scottish accent, which I don't do nearly as well as you, but I will try. May the best you've ever seen be the worst you'll ever see. May the moose ne'er leave your girnel wi' a teardrap in his ee. May your lum be blithely reeking till you're auld enough to dee. May ye aye be just as happy as I wish you now to be. To Lindsay and James. Thank you.